Hello and welcome everybody, I am One Proud Bavarian, and today we're going to talk about the most exciting game for middle-age enthusiasts, aside maybe from Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which made a surprise announcement of course just recently. Today we're going to be talking about Manor Lords. The medieval city builder is bound to enter early access on the 26th of April and is currently the most wishlisted game on all of Steam. This of course has a reason. There has rarely if ever been a video game that promises to unify city building aspects, warfare aspects and of course historically accurate aspects as much as this game. Over 3 million people alone have, because of this, wishlisted this game on Steam. And with a reach this big, it is no surprise that many people have different expectations and that at the same time, the game of course can't really fulfill all hopes and dreams put upon it now. In this video, I will discuss my thoughts on the game after roughly 60 hours of playing it. While I will give you a lot of information and a lot of opinions here, I want to be clear that this is not a review, and that is for two reasons. A, this is an early access game. It's very difficult to really judge what exactly is coming later. Calling something very great now if it could later crash and burn, that is difficult, and the same of course is true in reverse. Secondarily, however, I also think that I don't have a good enough frame of reference when it comes to the city builder genre, or when it comes to Total War. I may have more than 1 million hours in the Anno series, as it is legally required of me of course to keep my German passport, and I have played similar games just recently, like Ostriv and Foundation. Nonetheless, I haven't really played enough of, for example, the classic Banished or Timberborn to really have an opinion of what the current state-of-the-art technology for city builders is. Plus, it has to be said, Manor Lords is its own beast, almost its own genre. I think the last time that I personally played a city builder that really focused on warfare was somewhere down the line with Stronghold Crusaders and then also Imperium Romanum, which at this point both are ancient games. Now let's dive right into it by discussing everything that pertains to the topic of the gameplay feeling. The one thing that is, I think, the most obvious is that this game is incredibly historically authentic. Yes, of course, to really simulate everything going on in the Middle Ages is almost impossible, and something that I don't think a video game could ever do. But the love and care poured into attempting to be as true to history as possible, be it, for example, when it comes to the absence of a town guard, yes, that is historically accurate, be it down to, of course, the architecture that essentially leans heavily into the architecture of Franconia in the 14th century, or be it to how people lived their lives, what they needed, what they wanted, and of course what kind of economic directions arose from this. All of this is in Manor Lords. If you are an enthusiast for the Middle Ages, then this game is doubtlessly something that really goes into your direction. It wants to explore exactly what it was like, and it wants to build cities that just feel oddly familiar. I talked about this a lot in my gameplay videos on the channel, but the way these villages work right here and the way they come out ultimately is something that you can see depicted even today in virtually all German villages. The structure of building houses, where you build your market, your church, what kind of focus your villages have so that they run efficiently and ultimately also come out true to history, all of these things are depicted properly and beautifully in Manor Lords. The one thing that you probably want to be aware of is that I keep saying villages, because primarily Manor Lords in its current early access form is effectively a village builder rather than a city builder. Yes, you can go all the way up to level 3 housings, and those are quite formidable. But it has to be said that the entire step towards being a village, urbanizing, having guilds and so on is not really covered in the game as of yet. However, I would kind of see this as a positive as things are. Obviously, I'm looking forward to building proper fortifications, maybe castles, maybe huge cities. But the reality is that the love and care that was able to go into the village building aspect of this was of course only possible because the developer here has not rushed into already going into the later stages of your building projects. As you build your village and cross the 500, 600 and 700 population thresholds, you will slowly but surely still see this big advancement. Your small villages will feel and be significantly different from what is going on in your bigger ones. Ultimately, all of this will leave you with a hunger for more for sure. And, well, that can be a positive and a negative. Let's phrase it this way. I've really only done one major playthrough in Manor Lords so far. I still have so much to explore, and I'm 60 hours into the game. Now, of course, as you play the game, you will expand, you will colonize different territories, and you will connect them all together. This is a key, the front and center element of any given city builder. its supply chains. In Manor Lords, it is a big positive that you will immediately be aware of how these supply chains work. They are pretty straightforward, and in general you will rarely struggle to understand exactly what kind of ratio of buildings and such you want. Now, if you come from games like Anno 1800, like of course myself, then I will tell you this right now. You may have Anno 1800 supply chains pop up in your dreams to puzzle themselves out so that you can build them tomorrow in the game. Let me tell you, this kind of complexity isn't really something that Manor Lords does. Where the Anno series and many other games in this genre will, for example, have 4, 5 or 6 steps in a supply chain with multiple output goods, making it so that you need to be very flexible in how you plan things out and, of course, making sure that your logistics actually work out. Manor Lords occurs on a much more simple level. What we have right here are relatively flat supply chains, which, if you really think about it, obviously makes sense. You are building a village. You kill the animal and then take its hide and, well, make some leather out of it. That is ultimately it. Yes, later on you might also be making shoes out of it, but it never really gets all too complex. Now, this does have positives and negatives. For one, it is very clear what exactly a supply chain looks like, what you are interested in there, and how to construct and then indeed maintain it. Additionally, it makes it so that, despite the simplicity of these supply chains, you probably won't actually get all the resources you need from just one region in which your city is. This means that there is a big incentive to essentially go into different regions, take them over, and then make sure that you're getting whatever you need out of them. The gameplay loop there definitely works out. At the same time though, there are also some negatives, and you shouldn't make yourself any illusions out of this. If you are somebody that essentially plays nothing other than Anno and that just wants to optimize, then let me just be clear here. Optimization and min-max doesn't really run too deep in Manor Lords. The supply chains, with their simplicity, obviously make it so that there isn't too much to optimize, that there isn't too much to think about. Now, don't get me wrong here, you still want to be understanding how granaries work, how exactly you make it so that the storehouses bring whatever is needed in their location directly to there. But it's not something that you're going to be spending several nights on to come out with a layout that then just works. Because Manor Lords isn't like that. Manor Lords is an organic village builder. I do have hope that with the later stages of early access, the optimization and min-max crowd will get some more fodder. Because, well, of course, the more you urbanize, the more specialized your industries become, the more will that, of course, rely on you actually optimizing it. As it is, don't expect too much there. I mean, hey, this is a medieval village. These people weren't exactly running around doing rocket science. But it is nonetheless something that has to be said. Another thing when early access launches is of course that there is currently only one map. This map is quite interesting. You have some cliffsides, you have deep forests, you have, for example, one small river running through it and so on, but in general you will be seeing the exact same landscape every time, although your starting position will be changed and is random. I would recommend just rolling until you get whatever territory you want. As it is, I think this is completely fine. There's enough randomness with how the resources are distributed, whether you have fertility or not, and so on, making it so that not every playthrough is the same. And most importantly, of course, you can also just decide to build a bit differently in the same tile than you did last time. At the end of the day though, I do also think that of course more map variety would be amazing, whether they come from developers or modders. In my ideal world, at some point later down the line, there will simply be a map making tool that allows modders to create maps as they see fit. This is ultimately how you make games like, for example, City Skylines be something that you can return to again and again and again. Now be aware, I don't think it has been mentioned whether that is in the plans of the developer. It is just something where I would say, yeah, that would definitely be amazing. Now be aware though, there are not really any mountains in this map. There aren't really any big rivers, and of course there is no coastline. If you wanted to build specifically there, then you would be disappointed here. At the end of the day, I think that with the complexity of the maps, it is something that has to be done by a bespoke mechanism. Foundation, for example, now has an RNG generator for maps. I don't really think that this is something Manor Lords could or even should do, but I would really love it if at some point a map-making tool were released so that modders can work on it. I mean, just think about it, right? City Skylines has lived for as long as it has because the community has produced an unbelievable amount of maps that are all different and sometimes even depict real-life locations. There are people out there that built the entirety of Berlin in City Skylines 1. And I think that Manor Lords could do something similar, should any map-making tools ever be released. Now, to round out my thoughts on the city building / village building aspects of this game, let me just say, I do think, currently, the supply chains in this game are relatively flat. However, this flatness makes it so that I'm pretty sure every single piece of fat was cut out by the developer. All of the supply chains have a good reason to be exactly where they are. They have been trimmed down to do exactly what is required, and I think there's never really an intermediary step that feels superfluous. I would really urge you to not underestimate this element, because it is something that does fill me with a lot of confidence. Having these really thin and trimmed supply chains makes it so that you can build up on them without having to revise them further and further and again and again. This means that introducing more sub-mechanics should actually be quite easy. For example, currently tools aren't even required to keep your farms, to keep, for example, your backyards and such running. In a version where that is the case, you have another hurdle that just adds to it. Additionally, fire hazards aren't really in the game either. Yes, your houses can burn if lightning strikes them or if raiders burn them down, but of course the inherent risk of fire isn't really in the game. Adding this should be relatively easy, as, like I said, everything around it is working incredibly well. Additionally, of course, last but not least, we also have smell that currently isn't implemented, but would make it even harder to manage your city's happiness. All of this is something that I can see easily implemented and seamlessly integrated into the game, and this, at the end of the day, does at least partially come down to the fact that the mechanics currently all neatly fit into each other. So in short, when it comes to the gameplay feeling, if you are an optimizer, then the game state currently doesn't really leave you too much to optimize. If you are a village and city planner and builder, then yeah, this seems exactly right even in its current state. And well, it's only going to grow from here on out. Let's move on to the second major topic, visuals and performance. Manor Lords is an unbelievably beautiful game, and it is hard to build anything that turns out ugly in it. The love and care that went into the buildings, clothing, environment, and weaponry is self-evident in every single frame on your screen, and absolutely incredible. It makes one wish that finished settlements were proper RPG maps, as they seem so interesting and involved that the next step to actually playing in that location seems so clearly achievable. I can't say that I have ever had that feeling in any city builder that I have played. Visually speaking, Manor Lord is the uncontested winner in this genre. There's absolutely nothing that comes even close. In fact, it still looks great, even if you move into lower settings in your game. Only the lighting right here looks a bit ugly if you go that far down, but yeah, this game really knows how to look great. The game is beautiful by default, and the way path placements and plot placements and just generally building placements work plays directly into this, as they motivate the player subconsciously to build whatever feels natural to them. I think it's fair to say that the visual design and the UX design in this department were working together flawlessly. The outcome is that whatever you build, it virtually will always look good. I have seen a suburban hell sprawl and I still thought, that looks kind of cute. Now, of course, depending on your build, performance will differ, but I honestly feel that this is so well optimized that probably even relatively weak machines will be able to run it well. That is, until a certain point. While I'm praising the overall performance and how well the game retains visual fidelity on lower quality levels, I do also want to mention here that the game in its current state does have an issue with performance that you will likely be hitting eventually, regardless of your machine. I have experienced this in my own playthrough, and other content creators have also experienced this on the press build. What we've basically seen is that the closer you come to 2,000 total population on your map, which is pretty deep into a playthrough, don't get me wrong here, but the closer you come to it, the more will performance become sluggish. Now, well, this doesn't necessarily speak to your frames, but rather to the behavior of your villages. You will, for example, see it very commonly that villages will just pause and only after 5 to 10 seconds pick up where they need to go. Something that you will then also commonly see is that the pathfinding of your troops becomes not just sluggish, but almost completely unresponsive. I have seen troops basically being told to move to the other side of the map, and every 5 seconds they will double back and then continue walking, double back, continue walking, and so on and so forth. Something there isn't really right. I've also seen that when bandits spawn, they will literally just stand around and do absolutely nothing at all. Until I enter that region and they see, oh yes, I am hostile, I will now fight you. These kind of hiccups, of course, again, like I said, pop up relatively late in your playthrough, but they will make it so that with the current early access version as it releases, late game warfare doesn't really feel great. Now, to reach that point, I want to make this clear, you will probably be spending 30 to 40 hours in your campaign, depending on how fast you build, how much you min-max and optimize, and so on. But you will eventually reach that point. I am not really sure what causes this, but of course it really sucks. Let's hope that this is something that can be addressed going forward, especially of course as this game is planning to allow greater and greater city builds, which will require more and more pathfinding. Now, having mentioned warfare there at least a little bit, let's talk about it in full. Warfare is of course one of the big elements of Manor Lords. While this is a village/city builder, you have a surprising amount of dev time and indeed gameplay time dedicated to you commanding your troops. And I really have to give it props. Building up your army feels great. This is of course all happening on a very small scale because we are just in a particular region of Europe rather than, for example, on the entire continent like you would be in CK3, Total War and so on. But it feels incredibly satisfying, because initially they will mostly be made up of your actual citizens, which means if they fight they can't be working, and if they die, well, they also can't be working. The way you supply your households with weaponry, with armor and so on determines how well they will be protected, and it also means that there has to be a lot of planning behind what kind of militia you can raise and where you can raise it. Not just that, but the actual numbers that go into warfare and the way it feels are way more detailed than I expected, I'll just say it. I know that there are plenty of people out there that expect this to be the Total War killer, and listen, that obviously can't be it. That is a ridiculous assumption. However, the way war here feels incredibly engaging. Whatever strategy, whatever activity, whatever formation you choose for your army, whatever equipment they have, whether they are level 1 houses that can't have, for example, chainmail, or whether they are level 3 houses that can be equipped with the best weaponry and the best defense, well, it will make a big difference in how your troops fight and in how you can use them. Initially, for example, I heavily rely, and I would always recommend this, on archers, because, well, they will completely melt bandits. Later on the other hand, archer strength basically bottoms out significantly, as the Baron won't just have a disorganized group of bandits, but rather plate and helmet wearing absolute war machines that are only there to rip you apart. In general, I actually think this feels quite nice. When it comes to dedicated city builders, I think Manor Lords is yet again the strongest showing that I have ever seen when it comes to warfare on the map. Obviously, there are dedicated RTS games like Age of Empires, Stronghold and so on, but they aren't primarily city builders at the end of the day anyway. The offering here that we already have, the glimpse into the future of warfare in Manor Lords, is absolutely promising. The enemy AI currently is a bit of a mixed bag. Basically, when the Baron comes on with a big army, they will always immediately break formation and attack you. However, at the same time, when they attack you, they do it in a fashion where they try to circle around you, they try to essentially flank you, and that already feels great to see. Not to mention, of course, that the fights are visually stunning. They are very impressive, and I would recommend taking them in very well, because, yeah, again, I haven't seen this done in any city builder like this before. The only two really annoying things about warfare for me in this game currently are indeed the sluggishness that I talked about beforehand when it comes to bigger and late game maps right there, and then also the way current troop limitations are done. You can't have more than this amount of troops that you can see right here on the screen other than buying mercenaries. This does mean if you have more than one manor, you have more than one retinue slot, and if you ever dissolve a militia, you can't make a new one because the retinue takes that slot. This feels really cumbersome, and I would ultimately like it more if there were more repercussions to me raising these troops, so that I don't ever want to have more than, let's say, 6 troops raised at the same time. But as it is, it just means that I'm basically gonna no longer build manors in my adjacent regions, so that I instead can have militia units from those regions. Other than that, I think it's fair to say that the warfare in this game is above and beyond what I personally expected. Of course, it can't actually be as glorious and big as Total War, but every battle will matter, and every time you see your troops slay the opponent, you will feel immense satisfaction, especially with the amount of micro-tactics that you can employ as you maneuver your troops around. Now, lastly, let's just talk a little bit about bugs, about balancing, and so on. In general, there are some elements that just are buggy, that are unbalanced, but that is to be expected. I didn't encounter in my entire time anything that made me go, wow, this breaks my game, my campaign is over. Nothing like that at all. You can also jank a little bit. Yes, I know, technically there are no walls in the game yet for your cities. I still janked it together in one of my videos as well, and while that is not intended, there's a lot of freedom already with how you can design your cities, and the game rarely, if ever, gets in your way. Some of the specialization perks are also very good or very bad, but, well, yeah, welcome to the world of early access balancing. I don't think this is what should make you play or not play the game, because it is very much in a polished enough state that you will have a seamless and absolutely great experience in your campaign. So then, what are my closing thoughts here on the game. The bugs and imbalances aren't too many, and until you hit the sluggish performance point, you will have an unbelievable time for a city builder right here. Warfare is surprisingly strong, and I think can only get stronger from here on out once, for example, cavalry and so on is added as well. After designing several villages here on YouTube, I can only say that it was fun to create every last one. It is always an interesting experience, and like I said, the supply chains aren't that difficult, they aren't that complex, but they're complex enough to fit in neatly together and to give you something to puzzle out. But, like I said, if you are primarily a min-max builder, then yeah, there might not be too much for you to do here. Do take note that Manor Lords will also be on Xbox Game Pass on day one, which, well, yeah, makes sense, right? You can test it out right there. It's a very fair model. And then if you like it, if you already enjoy it, make sure to check it out on Steam to support the developer directly, because my god, he most certainly poured in an unbelievable amount of work. As far as I'm concerned, Manor Lords nails what it tries to do. It lives in several genres and it redefines certain elements of each one of them. If you go into this game as a fan of the Middle Ages, then my god, you will have an unbelievably great time. I am very much looking forward playing this game in the months and months to come, and maybe even in the years and years to come, as more and more mechanics, more and more features, and of course bigger and bigger cities are added. My one big issue with the game, like I said, is the sluggishness of pathfinding that sets in around 2000 and later, independent of your machine, at least from my observations. But other than that, this is already a great game, and I hope that this kink gets ironed out, because other than that, this game performs admirably, and I would be lying if I said that I didn't endure the sluggishness just because the game is that much fun anyway. But alright folks, that is everything that I can tell you about Manor Lords right now. I hope that this was informative for you. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you with more Manor Lords videos going forward once Manor Lords releases. For now, I'll leave it right here, and I'll see you later. Alligator.